Turn your food into medicine, and you won't need medicines anymore. Amen. I could not be more excited to introduce you to the brilliant Lucinda Miller. Lucinda Miller is the clinical lead of NatureDoc and runs a team of UK-wide nutritional therapists specialising in family nutrition and children with neurodevelopmental challenges and delays, as well as running an online health food shop, NatureDoc Shop. She has been practicing as a naturopath for over 25 years, qualified in functional medicine, and is author of the best-selling cookbooks, The Good Stuff, and I Can't Believe It's Baby Food. We are also very excited to share that she will be launching a brand new book called Brain Brilliance this summer, 2024. Lucinda is also the proud mama of 3 gorgeous kids and lives in Wiltshire in the UK. Now, as at the Brain Health Movement, we are about healthy development, strong foundations, and finding the root cause to problems, rather than sticking plasters on things and accepting short-term symptom management. To this end, we scour the earth for the creme de la creme of paediatric and brain development experts to inform and educate our wonderful followers, parents, carers, educators, and more. And we painstakingly select individuals who are not just esteemed leaders in their field, but who are also trailblazers with a passion to address the chronic state of health in our children today. They deliver their insights, expertise, and experience in a kind, accessible, digestible, and effective way. So with diet and eating being one of the most significant things we do as human beings, and a critical area of focus raising our children, with no further ado, I would like to welcome Lucinda. Thank you for joining us on the Brain Health Movement's podcast, my Mighty Quinn. Hello and good morning. How are you?
Hi, Lucia. It's great to see you. I'm on great form, thank you.
It's just so exciting to have you, Lucinda. And I thought no better place to start than with one of your own quotes, if I may. I dream one day doctors might be able to say, "There's nothing medically significant that we can find, but clearly your child is suffering, so please seek other support," rather than, "Your child's tests are normal and there's nothing wrong." Lucinda, what do you mean by this?
I find that many parents can see that their child is really struggling with their development, with their behaviour, with their focus, with their learning, with their self-esteem, etc. Maybe they've got gut issues, maybe they've got highly selective eating, and life is pretty full on, pretty chaotic, pretty intense. And they can see that there's something else going on. And so often they will go and seek out medical advice. And unless it's really a tumour or seizure activity, the doctors won't do very much. They will do a blood test, probably, if the child is willing to have blood drawn. And very often when we do see those, most of the time, these test results come back within normal range, as in there's nothing medically significant going on. They're not sick, then they don't need to go into A&E, they don't need to go to hospital, they don't need long-term medication. The only thing that usually comes up in these blood tests is maybe low iron, which is very common amongst children. We'll probably talk about that later. But generally, these kids with neurodevelopmental delay often will show a pretty healthy profile in terms of blood. However, what is happening is day to day, they may be not eating very much or eating a very narrow diet. So they do have vitamin and mineral deficiencies. They may have gut issues. They may be in pain with hypermobility associated issues. They may find it really difficult to get to sleep. So this impacts their whole lives. And until the day that the doctors say, we know there's nothing going on in the bloods, but there must be more going on, let's take this further, I feel that there's this incredible sort of gap where there are children being basically ignored. And it's just a mentality. And it was very interesting. I was hearing a nurse talk about this the other day. And when you're in hospital and you're very unwell, basically they have a saying, are you sick or not sick? And so, of course, you're sick because you're in hospital, right? But what they mean by sick is basically you need life support or you need critical care. And if you're in recovery and you're going along the right trajectory to get home again soon, you're not sick. So these are words that have been bandied around in the medical system that a lot of us on the street don't understand or take very literally. And it must be so often parents say, look, we've seen the doctors, they say my child is normal. Is this my new normal? Is this forever? And sometimes, yes, that's the case. Your child has specific developmental delay and it's difficult for them to progress. But so often, when you put the input in, whether it's helping to mature primitive reflexes, whether it's to add their nutrition, whether it's to do osteopathic work, whatever it might be, or audio integration, speech and language therapy, all these things can help to move a child on. And yes, some of these things are offered by the NHS, but a very small amount. I don't know where it's at now, but I've been looking after kids for nearly 20 years doing this now. I've been practicing for nearly 28, but I was really focused in on the kids about 20 years ago due to my children's sort of needs. But I found that even then, a child might get 5 or 6 speech and language sessions through the NHS. And this is a child that's non-verbal, non-speaking, unable to communicate at all. And a handful of speech and language therapy sessions is not going to help. And so people do end up having to turn privately to these things. But the great thing about food is we have to feed our children every single day, at least 3 times a day. Most of our kids graze all day too. And these are our opportunities to be able to nourish their brains in a relatively easy way. I know there are always going to be blocks along the way. There are highly selective eaters. That's what neurodivergence seems to bring, is a difference in ability to take on textures and tastes and smells. But that's something that can be helped over time. So basically, yes. I feel that nutrition is something that you have to feed your children anyway. So let's supercharge the food and get their brains as sharp as possible through eating good food.
Absolutely. And that's such an insight, isn't it? There's this cavernous divide between what is regarded to be okay, living healthily, and what is not. As you say, unless you're seen to be chronically ill, you're sent away with a clean bill of health, agitated stomachs, eczemas, skins, loose bowels, all of these sorts of things that I certainly remember taking little Quinn to the GP and being sent, oh, that's just normal. Don't worry about that. Things getting passed off, where clearly right then, had we known, had we had a you in our life, had we known about primitive reflexes right back then, we would have started to address it at a foundational, preemptive. Don't wait for worse symptoms to manifest. We've got this wonderful vehicle, food. Let's use it to best effect. But unfortunately, there isn't that communication channel open. But let's break this down, Lucinda, because I think a lot of the time we're all in a bit of a state of overwhelm with what we can and can't do. And simplification is super helpful. So one of the things you've touched on, which I'd like to come back to, is this idea, and we're hearing a lot of it at the moment in the news and in nutritional magazines and so on, is toxic load. That our children are burdened with a toxic load. What does that mean again, and how can we start to address that in simple steps?
So our modern world, unfortunately, is very polluted. So even though measures have been taken to take lead out of petrol, for instance, England, I would say, is one of the better countries to live in terms of pollution. But every single day we're exposed to things like plastics. There's plastic bottles, plastic wrapping on our food, more so than, say, in Europe. And it's thought, I've read a paper maybe a year or 2 ago, which suggested that us as humans are now consuming the equivalent of a credit card's worth of plastic each week.
Wow, a credit card of plastic each week. Let's just take that in for a moment. Extraordinary. So that's one area, isn't it? Yeah.
That's one area which can create disruption in the endocrine system. So it can lead to early puberty in girls and late puberty in boys. And also exacerbate menstrual issues, puberty issues, mood swings, etc. It's also been linked to other kind of hormonal imbalances and over time things like infertility. So these things are very important. We do have pollution in our air. We have an awful lot of cars on the road, whether it's pumping out lead or not. It's still a lot of pollution in the air. Our soil is now full of heavy metals. So even organic food is now often polluted by things like lead, cadmium, arsenic, etc. So we can't escape. They found toxins on the North Pole, they found them on the South Pole, they're all throughout the world. So it's very difficult to avoid entirely. It's partly because there are so many people on this planet. It's partly because we are living a very modern life. We're expecting everything to be a lot of things are manufactured now. As I said, we rely on aeroplanes, we rely on cars, we rely on all these things which pump pollution into our environment.
And as you say, the mass production of food as well, right? Which is bringing these toxins directly into our best efforts to eat clean food, as you say, even organic.
Yes, so actually, unless a fruit has a very obvious skin that you would peel off, like a banana, pineapple, etc., I would suggest that you peeled your fruit and veg, or at least washed it, to help reduce those pollutants to come into the body. Yes. So we are a very polluted planet, unfortunately, so we can't escape from it. However, what can happen is if the pathways in the body are stuck and aren't able to excrete it, then we can become more toxic than, say, our sibling or our friend. And that's why we look at people and say, why is it that someone can live off McDonald's every day for years and seemingly be okay? Whereas others can eat one McDonald's and feel pretty lousy for days afterwards. Why is it that one person can eat a nut and it can benefit them and give them a great amount of nutrition, whereas another might have an anaphylactic shock? Yeah, so we're all wired slightly differently. So partly it's to do with how we excrete. So if we sweat nicely, so if we do lots of exercise, children often sweat at night, especially neurodivergent kids, they're definitely trying to get the toxins out. So sweating is very good to do. Is very important too. Okay, so a lot of kids that we see in our clinic are incredibly constipated, and when you've seen x-rays, they've been absolutely stuffed full with constipation and very difficult to pass it out. If you're very constipated, that's going to keep the toxins in. Equally, if they don't drink much water or their water isn't filtered, then again that can hamper the ability for the kidneys to detoxify,
flush things out.
Yeah, exactly. So we have these natural detoxification systems. Now, getting a little bit deeper without blinding anyone with too much science, is that we make in our bodies an amazing thing called an antioxidant, and it's called glutathione. And glutathione is our master antioxidant that our body makes to be able to get rid of toxins, reduce inflammation in the body, which is things like pain and anything like swollen skin or asthma or whatever. It helps to prevent autoimmune diseases like type 1 diabetes or multiple sclerosis or rheumatoid arthritis, etc. So basically, it helps with those detox pathways. And many neurodivergent kids have a genetic predisposition, which means they find it very hard to do that. It's complicated. There are various genes involved. The main one that people have heard of is called MTR, which is related to folic acid or folate, which comes from eating green vegetables. The other one that's very involved is B12, which tends to come from eggs and meat and fish. Now, what we find is, first of all, you may be genetically predisposed to not being able to make this glutathione very easily. But secondly, you may have the overexposure within the home. Maybe there's a lot of lead in your paintwork or whatever, or you eat a lot of rice, which may have some arsenic in it, or whatever that might be. And thirdly, you may not eat the foods that help to create that glutathione. So they may not eat their greens, they may not eat much meat or eggs or fish. Most neurodivergent kids I know, when they first start out with our clinic, they're eating a lot of pasta, toast, cereal, milk, cheese, but they're not really eating beige foods.
Beige foods,
beige crunchy foods. So this is something which is a hurdle, and therefore that's why the toxic load can build up. So when we do tests, whether it's a hair test or a urine test or whatever test we choose to do to find out what the sort of toxic load might be, the parents are often quite shocked by what is shown in the results. And that helps to motivate them too, because they go, oh my goodness, lead. Okay, lead reduces IQ. Lead could easily mean a developmental delay, for instance, and it's relatively easy over time to clear lead from the system, and that is obviously trying to remove it from your environment. And then things like apple pectin, which comes from having lots of freshly squeezed apple juice or eating apples and pears, lots of the zest from and the pulp from lemon and limes and oranges, those delicious fruity, and most kids like fruit, so that's often quite a good way. You can use things called Epsom salts, which are magnesium salts in the bath, which help to detox a little bit. And then there are various different other sort of things like
saunas
coriander,
and sweating and running. You were talking
sweating,
about
exactly, and all of that. So that's why the sporty
Yes.
ADHD kid is often going to improve their ADHD over time because they're sweating out the toxins.
Yes.
But things like coriander and parsley, so making lots of pestos and salsa verdes and things like that, and using those in your cooking, guacamole and things like that, can also help to detox.
Great. Wow. It's a hell of a universe, isn't it? To try and to think what's coming in from the air, what's coming in from the water, what's coming in from the diet. But I'd like to take us back again, Lucinda, to this feeling of overwhelm, because listening to this, it would be understanding if you didn't want to walk out your front door with your little baby. The toxins in the air, the petrol, the this, the that, don't eat the plastic, don't have the, as you said, a credit card of plastic every week we're consuming. So I often find, and I have been prone to a meltdown or two in Tesco's trying to work out how I could be gluten-free but not too much sugar, dairy-free but not packed full of other crap in the milk to compensate for it not being dairy, or added sugar to give taste, or this removed to give that. And I used to joke with friends that taking the mickey out of nutritionists who say, for your smoothie, take the finest downy hair from the rarest Himalayan goat and mix it with the chia seeds planted only in August and sprinkle with organic cocoa powder from Ghana. That sort of idea of nutrition where people just go, I can't consume this amount of information. I don't have time. It's expensive. So really, what I think you are such an extraordinary queen of is breaking this down. It doesn't have to be hugely challenging. It doesn't have to be massively time consuming, and nor does it have to be outrageously expensive. There are some things that you can do straight away. For example, with organic food. One of your fantastic clinicians I heard speaking actually and said that you could put some fruit and vegetables in bicarbonate of soda in water to try and draw out some of the toxins, because half the time organic is either too expensive or not even available for certain bits and pieces. So that might be one tip. Gluten-free breads, again, very expensive, Lucinda, and often quite tasteless. So baking them might be an option. Could you talk us through a few things, maybe from your own recipe books, or just some tips on quick wins that don't have you, like me, sobbing on the Tesco supermarket floor because you just can't find anything that ticks all the boxes?
So my first tip is to cook from scratch as much as possible. So have good quality ingredients at home. I know it takes a little bit more thought and time and probably a bit more washing up to do. But if you've got simple things, you could have, I don't push the gluten-free, dairy-free diet at all unless the child specifically needs that. And we would normally run a urine test to understand whether that was something that was affecting their brain or not.
For sure.
So I will touch on that towards the end, but I think really it's to have things that your child does like to eat. So for instance, you look at your child's typical day and think, okay, they like to have porridge for breakfast. So first of all, you could soak the porridge oats the night before in some yogurt, in some apple juice, some nuts and seeds or whatever, so that it's ready to go. So all you have to do is heat it up. You don't even need to cook it. You just literally heat it up and it's ready to go. That could be an easy tip. But basically porridge. My mother was slightly Scottish, and our porridge would be porridge oats with water and then a bit of brown sugar on top. If I ate that, even as a young child, I remember feeling absolutely drained within 10 minutes of eating it, almost wobbly, like blood sugar low. And I'd feel like I needed to go back to bed. That's how bad I felt. Okay. And so I always assumed I just can't do oats. You know how you just assume that porridge is not my friend, right? And this is something I worked out in my little mind, even from quite young, that was not going to work for me until I learned about supercharging porridge. So first of all, you cook the porridge in whole, ideally organic, but whole full fat milk. Okay. So first of all, in there, you've got some really healthy fats. You've got some good quality protein that's going to stabilize those oats. So you're not just getting all carbohydrate. You're getting a little nice balanced meal. Because we all know about a balanced plate, don't we? But we always think about supper time. You always think about the broccoli and the potatoes and the meat. But you don't think about breakfast being a balanced meal at all. So first of all, that was helpful. And that
Lucinda,
probably sustained me.
Can I just interject there? Because that was such a revelation to me. Just remember your proteins at breakfast. Remember your proteins all the time. That's what we're looking for. So I've been breaking an egg into Quinn's porridge in the morning for that reason, and just been feeling great because he's got an egg in his porridge, because it's not just a bowl of oats. Is that another thing we could do?
Yes, that's just such a genius thing to do. So I was just going to say, so the first thing you would do is milk, because you think, okay, you're going to probably add a bit of milk at the end anyway to cool it down. So they like that. That's normal for them. The next thing that you can do is to get ground seeds. So you can get blends, so a few chia seeds, flax seeds, sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, whatever it might be. They literally taste of nothing. They're almost the same texture and colour as the porridge. So even the fussiest eater, you can put that in, and suddenly you're getting more protein in there. Brilliant. You're getting the fibre to help them poo. You're helping to nourish this thing called the gut microbiome. Almost immediately, you're turning that porridge into something that may last them 1 or 2 hours. Even 4 hours if you get enough of the seeds in. But you build it in slowly. You might put half a teaspoon in, then a teaspoon, because I know these kids can sense change very easily.
I got caught out this morning, Lucinda, for putting chia and flax seeds in the porridge. I thought, I've got the egg in now. I've got the MCT oil in now. This is like protein fuel. This is brilliant. And I tried to get the flax seeds, and he went, "What's this, mummy?" And I was like, I don't know. So I made it the same way as normal. It's like, I can taste something. I was like, darn. So yes, you do. You have to do it bit by bit, don't you?
You bit by bit. And another tip is almond butter or cashew butter, because again, they don't taste that much. Peanut butter obviously has a stronger taste, but if they like peanut butter, they might really like it, and they might want to put banana in it or whatever. Some love to have berries in there. The egg is a genius idea, and it doesn't taste. It makes it slightly shiny,
creamier. Yes,
it's nicer. It is absolutely nicer. So that's a real win. And then, because so many neurodivergent kids don't like the texture normally of egg, some love it. That's great. But there's an awful lot, I find. It's one thing. So they'll have egg in cakes. They're not allergic, but they just don't like the texture of scrambled eggs or boiled eggs or whatever. Yep. So this is a really good way to get it in. So that's what you can do with porridge. And then you can get quinoa flakes in, you can get hazelnut butter, you can get cocoa powder in there. You can really make porridge fun. So if they're a porridge kid, that is easy peasy. If they prefer more the crunchy side of things, this is something you may want to prepare the night before, but you can make waffles, you can make pancakes, and again, you've got the egg, you can get ground almonds in there, you can get yogurt, you can get grated carrot, you can get grated courgette. So that's the next step. But waffles seem to be one of the best wins. Probably my most popular recipes have been waffles.
Oh, look that one up. We actually shared on our newsletter, Lucinda, your buttermilk pancake recipe. It's going out this weekend, so we're excited about that one. But I will definitely look up the waffles, because it's treat-looking food is also how the food looks and presents is a big part of the win as well, isn't it? As long as it doesn't look like a broccoli, if it looks like a sort of naughty pudding, you're halfway there, aren't you?
Absolutely. And you can make it a full meal. The proteins, the carbs, the fats, you've got zinc, you've got magnesium, you've got omega-3. You can get it all in, the veggies all into a waffle. And that's what's so fantastic. And if they're not that hungry when they wake up in the morning, which a lot of neurodivergent kids are not quite ready for breakfast, even though they need fuel before school, they can munch on a waffle in the car or walking to school even, because it's easy. They do take a bit of time to make. So that's why I say do them the night before, doing them at the weekend. They freeze beautifully. You can just pop them in the toaster to defrost and warm up, ready to go. It's one of those great things. And most of them associate waffles with something rather treaty, as you said. So they think it's rather fun, and it's crunchy and it's beige.
Perfect.
So that's
it's
a real
crunchy
win.
and it's beige.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's breakfast. And I think breakfast is the most important meal of the day.
Okay, note that, everybody. Breakfast is the most
Especially for
important.
neurodivergent kids. So first of all, if they're on ADHD medication, within half an hour of taking that ADHD medication, their appetite will completely disappear until the medication wears off. So this means they probably won't have that much lunch. And the biggest worry for parents about a child being on ADHD medications is them not growing and losing weight because they're missing out on at least one meal a day. So that's where really supercharging breakfast is key, especially for those kids. However, generally, remember, almost all the academic work that's done at school and the most demands on a child's brain is in the morning. So even if it means you have to get up 10 minutes early to make sure breakfast is really substantial, then it is worth that 10 minutes because they will find school so much easier. So not only will they do better at school, not only will they probably eat a better lunch at school as well because they'll be less strung out by lunchtime, but also they'll be much easier to manage after school because that blood sugar, which basically you're maintaining with this slow release food over the morning, it will last through till about 3 p.m. if they've had a little bit of food in between. And that means when you pick them up, they're not just going to raid the Oreos or the crisps.
Yes, and
they're
crash.
going to actually be totally happy to have a banana, get home, have the hummus and the carrots or whatever, rather than just being a nightmare. Because the dysregulated child after school is such hard work.
It is such hard work. And actually, I have such a sense of calm waving Quinn goodbye in the mornings because he's had this amazing breakfast. I look at it, I think, how did you get all that down? Your huge smoothie with all the goodies in it, the porridge with the egg in it. He's full. So if for any reason he's rushing his lunch down so he can go out and play footy, he might not eat as well at lunchtime, but he's managed because his breakfast was hearty. So by the time I get him at 3:15, I'm ready there with the protein again. So it is very much about thinking in advance, preparing in advance as much as you can so that you're not caught short and you're suddenly, I'm starving after school and you're running into a corner shop and picking up something full of sugar, which brings me on to actually, before I do, could you quickly, because this is my promise to my listeners and our followers to keep things simple, you mentioned gut microbiome and I was about to ask you about it anyway. Would you mind just briefly explaining it, the gut microbiome, please?
Yes. So inside our bellies, inside our gut and intestines, there is an important ecosystem full of billions and billions of bacteria. So many bacteria that this is thought that there are actually more bacteria in our guts than there are cells in our bodies. So that's how many bacteria we have in our bellies. We've always thought that our gut, what does it do? It digests food, it makes poo. That's it, isn't it? But actually a lot more. So this gut microbiome helps with digestion. So it helps to digest certain foods. So like milk and dairy, for instance. It helps to make B vitamins. If your family is plant-based, you're not eating much meat, then the B vitamins are very critical to make within the gut. It also helps to dial down something called inflammation in the body, and inflammation can be manifested as anything from brain fog to rage, to mood swings, to eczema, to asthma, to aches and pains. So it really helps with all of those things. But where this is linked to the brain, this is where it's critical, is these gut bacteria help to make something called neurotransmitters. And neurotransmitters are brain chemicals. We've probably all heard of something called serotonin. Serotonin helps us sleep, helps us poop, but puts us in a good mood. And 90 to 95% of that serotonin is made in the gut by that gut bacteria. The gut bacteria also makes things like dopamine, which is very important if your child has any kind of focus issues, impulsivity, maybe ADHD. Also, it helps to make acetylcholine. So if your child has any working memory issues, processing issues, self-regulation, emotional regulation issues, then acetylcholine is key. So nourishing that gut microbiome is really key. How do you do that? Ideally, you would do that by consuming fermented and cultured foods, things like live yogurts, kefirs, maybe a splash of apple cider vinegar in a bolognese, maybe some miso, these sorts of foods. There are things like sauerkrauts and kimchi. I know they're not massively children friendly, so I just think start with the things that are relatively straightforward. Obviously, a lot of kids are dairy free, so they can't have some of these. So if they've been on antibiotics, which can wipe out the gut microbiome, so even though it gets rid of the bad bacteria you don't want, it also can kill quite a lot of the good bacteria that helps to make these neurotransmitters. I often suggest a probiotic supplement, especially if their diet is very limited. The other way to help create a diverse and really flourishing gut microbiome that helps to create these neurotransmitters is also to eat a wide range of fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, etc., whole grains, pulses. And these, especially the fruits and vegetables, the brightly coloured pigments in these. So think of carrots. You've got orange carrots, you've got purple carrots, you've got yellow carrots. Those have all got different polyphenols or different pigments. And those will all nourish the microbiome in a slightly different way. Okay.
It's good to know, like a rainbow plate, if we can think of things simply. Just make sure it's as colourful as possible and unprocessed.
Absolutely. So obviously, where do you get blocks with this? You might get blocks if the child is a very highly selective eater, won't eat any fruit and veg, is dairy free, been on lots of antibiotics, maybe even had reflux medications, because those again can reduce the diversity in the gut. Maybe there may be presence of things like parasites, other bacterial infections, again, which can cause an imbalance in the gut. So that's what we do in our clinic as a primary part of our work. We might run a gut microbiome test, see whether there are enough of the good guys. What about the bad guys? Is the digestion working well? Is the absorption working well, etc.? And then we work on that very individually. But the things that I've just talked about are things that you can do day to day by, even if it's, as I said, even if it's just grating a little bit of courgette into the bolognese or whatever it might be, will help, or smushing in some red lentils into a tomato sauce will still help. Getting an extra vegetable into a sauce will help. So even if it's using lentil pasta or whatever it might be, trying to get different types in will help to nourish this gut microbiome.
That's fantastic. And to hide it a little bit as well, just a trick on that I've been doing recently is I've been throwing a lot of the bolognese sauce into my NutriBullet, where the famous smoothies are being made in the morning, and I'm hiding all of those vegetables in there in the tomato sauce. So he's getting it all in, and then I cook it up with his grass-fed organic mince, which is my one big expenditure to get the organic meat in, and he loves it. And it's got broccoli, it's got courgettes, it's got every green I dream of getting down crim, but all hidden. So is that something we could do as well? Just smush it in so they don't see it?
Absolutely. So if your child will have sauces, some will not have any sauce. They will not have a bolognese, they will not have a tomato sauce, nothing. We see kids like that. And in fact, the recipe coming out on Sunday, which I'm really excited about, is a pizza.
Oh.
And it's a red lentil base pizza.
You have to be a brilliant cook for that, Lucinda.
No, not at all. You soak the lentils, you turn it into a batter, you form it into pizza bases, and that's it. It's really easy. No rising involved, no 3-day ferment, anything like that. And this weekend, it was some black bean and beetroot muffins. So again, they literally taste like normal chocolate muffins, but they were just full and packed of goodness. So this is what I try and do. I try and create recipes where there's a bit of a sticking point, where the child won't eat vegetables, they won't eat fibre, they won't all these things, and trying to find really great ways to get it in, because I know how important it is. And we've seen these microbiome tests, we've seen how low and depleted these microbiomes are. And of course, as I said, they're the building blocks for what goes on in the brain. How does this gut bacteria, these neurotransmitters, basically the neurotransmitters that are in the gut, the serotonin, the acetylcholine, GABA, the dopamine, etc., that's made in the gut, this is thought to either go into the bloodstream and up to the brain that way, or through an amazing nerve in the body called the vagus nerve, which connects the back of the brain to the gut. It's a really long wandering nerve.
The best nerve in the body, the most important little big fella, really.
Exactly, the big fella. And think of it as a superhighway sending signals up and down. And apparently about 10 to 20% of the signals from the brain go down the vagus nerve to the gut. but 80 to 90% go from the gut to the brain. So what's going on in the gut is more influential on the brain than what's going on in the brain is influential on the gut. So that's why
so
it's super
interdependent.
important.
Hence the brain-gut link. And we will be speaking to someone in a few weeks' time from the Brain Gut Institute. And I think the more we can see your world and our world, the primitive reflex world, the building of the correct foundations for the brain alongside what we're putting into the gut, which affects autoimmunity, which affects mood regulation, which affects everything. With those two partners in crime, if we can understand their interrelation, I think we are some way towards addressing the root cause of many of the symptoms that we're seeing with ADHD: attention, emotional regulation, concentration, meltdowns, and so forth. What about triggers and troublemakers, Lucinda? I wanted to touch on these because I see sweeties being handed out all the time, and sometimes I think our parents just unaware of what actually happens. I call it the great Satan sugar. We know young kids love it. We know you can't strip it out completely. But could you talk to us a little bit, please, about the effect of sugar and then what we can do to replace it in scrummy, yummy ways? Quinn now opens the cupboard with this chocolate that I bought from your wonderful website. Can I have the healthy chocolate, Mummy? And I'm like, I give him a little bit now, knowing that I'm not going to send his blood sugar levels through the roof. But would you mind just taking us back a little bit and talking about...
Our brains all do need glucose, okay? They need glucose to work, but we can get glucose from many different sources. A carrot, a sweet potato, even tomatoes, apples, pears, these all will give you some glucose, okay? It might be via fructose through the fruit, but basically we're going to get sugar through food. And most of the time, if we eat some kind of carbohydrate or some kind of sugar, that will be enough for our brains. And I think children for centuries have always had a little bit of sweet tooth, been given little bits of sweeties here and there, little bits of cake here and there, and that's very normal. However, sweets were normally given as a pudding after food rather than a snack in the middle of the day. And there's quite a lot of research to show that kids that have ADHD, have dyslexia, dyspraxia, sensory processing, autism, are much more prone to developing things like type 2 diabetes and other metabolic illness that is associated with blood sugar dysregulation.
Goodness.
And personally, I have ADHD. And one of my biggest challenges has been to get my blood sugars properly balanced. My mother had both type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So I'm built metabolically exactly like her. So I do know that is my biggest challenge. And when my brain is empty of glucose, I cannot think straight. But when I feed it the right foods, I was going back to the porridge. So that is why when I ate the porridge that was made with water and brown sugar, my blood sugars, my pancreas could not cope. It spiked far too much insulin to cope with that. And then I got this really low blood sugar.
Goodness.
So I think a lot of kids with neurodivergence, you will associate with them getting very hangry very easily. If lunch is delayed, they get very ratty. Often mid-morning during lessons, they might become very distracted. And it's partly because they haven't got enough sugar in their brain. So it's not about whether they have sugar or not. It's all about a balance. So if you can get a porridge in, as I said, with the nut butters, with the egg, with the seeds, whatever, the whole milk in there, then that's going to balance their blood sugars all morning so that their energy and their focus will be very sort of wax and wane, slow, little hills, right? Whereas if they were to have the porridge with the water and the brown sugar or the honey, they are literally going to have pure glucose spike, and it's going to go up steep like a mountain and then shooting down as fast, like going down a black run, and then up again and down again. And that is where their focus will be out. And this is why they get so tired by the end of the day.
Yes, and
their body
dysregulated.
Absolutely. Dysregulated emotions is often dysregulated blood sugars.
Absolutely. In an ideal world, you would regulate their systems to the extent, as we all know, once you've got a balanced diet and you're feeling good, you stop craving a lot of the stuff that's naughty anyway, don't you? You don't seek the sugar because it's come in healthful ways outside of that. But given the little challenge of the treats that our kids do love, if we're trying to buy healthier chocolate, what are the ingredients we're looking for in the chocolate? We're looking for it to not have the processed refined sugars, or we're looking for it to be more higher raw cocoa content. I want to know what I can buy for my little guy and treat him. What gets the thumbs up from you?
So not all kids love dark chocolate, but they can become acclimatized to it over time. Okay. So I would start with probably 55%, then go to 60, then try and find 65, 70, then you might go up to 85. I think probably above that is really quite bitter.
Very bitter.
It's quite unique to...
Well, you're quite sneaky, aren't you, Lucinda? Bit by bit.
Bit by bit. So the higher the cocoa content, the more polyphenols, the more goodness, the more magnesium, all the really good parts of dark chocolate turns my brain on. I get hyperfocus all day. I have found it better than almost any other thing I've tried in terms of... So chocolate is my friend personally. And so therefore I'm a big fan. So it's not about chocolate. So you can use things like cocoa powder, so raw cacao powder,
which I bought from your site,
in the porridge,
which is
for
fabulous.
Instance. So you can use it in baking. So it's not about the chocolate. But unfortunately, most confectionery chocolate tends to be 35% chocolate, and the rest is sugar and skimmed milk powder, which again is often making it more sugary or a sugar hit. So really what I would do is to, as I said, get the best chocolate you can, build up the darkness, you can mix it with fruit. So we often will get, say, a date, maybe put some almond butter in it, coat it with some melted chocolate, maybe put even a raspberry in there or something like that. And again, that makes the darkness of the chocolate seem less dark because there's a bit of sweetness.
Yes.
And then the chocolates you were talking about that we stock at Nature.shop is by the Raw Chocolate Company. And these are amazing because they just use coconut sugar, which has a much lower hit on the blood glucose. So table sugar, which is what they would use normally in, say,
Mars bars,
whatever, that will have a glycemic index hit on the blood sugar at, I'll talk about percentages because it's easy, at 85%.
Right.
Whereas coconut sugar, honey and maple syrup is more like 60, 65. So it's still going to give it a hit, but it's a bit less. The bump
a bit more controlled release.
So that mountain is not quite so steep. Okay. And then they coat things like mulberries, goji berries, almonds, ginger. And so you've got that sort of sweetness, and and kids seem to really like them, and they're quite small, so they could just have a few. You could put they look like large raisins, so they're like chocolate raisins, chocolate yogurts, those little.
Yes,
so
I sprinkle them.
Yeah, exactly. Or you could sprinkle them. So that's why I particularly love them. And mulberries are full of iron, goji berries are full of antioxidants, so they've got protein in both of them. So they're good, nice, balanced little kind of snacks. They're not the only ones on the market, obviously, but it's just looking to see how, and for instance, if you are giving chocolate, or even if you're giving fruit, to try and balance that snack with something that's got good levels of protein and healthy fats. So it might be, I'm going to give you some chocolate,
nuts,
but I'm going to give you some almonds or some hazelnuts or some pecans, or I'm going to give you an apple and a couple of chunks of cheddar. Or you're going to have some carrot sticks, because I say carrots turn into glucose too. You could give them some hummus. So that's where, and this is where one of my bugbears, and it's just one of those things that you and I don't know how old you are, I think you're way younger than me, but the way we were brought up was with the low-fat mentality.
Yes.
So healthy snacks have been seen to be fruit, raisins, breadsticks, rice cakes, things like that.
And where's the protein? Where's the
protein? Where's the healthy fat?
Yep.
So this is where we have been duped into thinking these are healthy snacks. Yes, they're missing a lot of the ultra processing, which obviously we do want to avoid, but still, they're still all carbohydrate.
Yes.
And so if your child's had Cheerios with oat milk for breakfast, which is a super high glycemic index. And then they've got rice cakes and some grapes for break time.
They're literally crashing and burning minutes afterwards at school, aren't they?
Exactly. So it's very hard because schools are very strict now on snacks, and they may not allow some of these things. So that's where the breakfast is so key, because you can't rely on the snacks. Because we used to have, when we were young, we'd have a little bottle of milk. Now it was probably pretty warm and horrid, but it was still had some protein and healthy fat in there, which we're not getting anymore. So yes, so snacks really is to probably have a little kind of box of little compartments, so that when you're out and about, they can pick out on lots of different parts of that.
Oh, that's so helpful. Lucinda, we've got some quick fire questions, but I'm going to challenge you, if you can, to try and answer these in just a couple of minutes, if you can, from our wonderful parents who knew you were coming on. If it's okay, could I ask you a few of those questions?
Yes, absolutely. I'll give it a go.
Okay. You've touched on this a little bit, but perhaps not with regards so fully to supplements. What are your top supplements for major emotional dysregulation?
Okie dokes. It depends on age, obviously, but I'm going to give you from 6, 7 plus. Okay. So one of my favourites is something called theanine, or L-theanine. It comes in little apple gummies or capsules, depending on age. And this is the same effect that you would have having had a cup of tea, but without the caffeine. If you've had a big shock, someone says, have a nice cup of tea, dear. And afterwards, the shaking's gone, you've calmed down. And it's because the tea contains this theanine, which acts on a neurotransmitter in the brain called GABA, G-A-B-A. And this gives you that sort of Zen-like calm feeling. Theanine can be absolutely life-changing, and it works pretty quickly on the system.
So once dysregulated, Lucinda, just to be clear, it's have it to calm down as opposed to preventatively.
Both. So you can get into routine of giving them 1 or 2 at breakfast, 1 or 2 when you pick them up from school, to help through the bumps along the way. But also equally, sometimes these kids are predictably unpredictable. And therefore, if you've got a few in a little pot in your bag and there is a major meltdown, it might just help them to regulate and for you to get out of a dangerous space, get them.
Wow, that's fantastic. Incidentally, as we go through, just to let our listeners know, we are going to be producing the top tips and a fantastic free guide on everything that Lucinda's saying, so that you'll be able to download that from the show notes. If you're frantically taking notes, I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but know that we'll have this all for you afterwards. Second question. Once you have removed dairy and gluten from what has clinically been shown as stress-induced IBS from my gastroenterologist, what else could you do? Now, before you answer that, I think it's super interesting, Lucinda, that we're talking about the brain-gut link, the links between our world at the brain health development, where we're brain health movement, where we're looking at foundational movements to help work with the neuroplasticity of the brain, to build those healthy foundations in conjunction with diet. IBS has just recently, which is irritable bowel syndrome for any of our listeners that aren't aware of what that is, has recently been given another name. I was reading last night, which is disorder of the gut-brain interaction, which is very much the heartland of what you and I have been talking about throughout this podcast. So interesting, this question is IBS. So what else could be done beyond removing some of the irritants for this young teenage lady? Her mother's asking on her behalf.
So the reason why the foods will have been suggested to is because the gut's immune system has tagged them as aliens as such, as in really struggling to digest and break down the proteins that are quite tough proteins to break down, which are the gluten and dairy ones. So this is why they often are the foods that people need to take out if they've got an irritable bowel. But what you always think it's not the food's fault, that actually over time, wouldn't it be wonderful for them to have a broader diet and not have to stick to these things? That's our mission with Nature Doc, is to get kids, other than the severely anaphylactic kids and the kids with celiac disease, you want to be able to get them to be able to have at least a small amount sometimes and not have fear of food.
Absolutely.
So the things that you can do to heal that gut is, first of all, to have something called bone broth, which is where you make a really rich stock from your chicken bones, so from a Sunday lunch, and you try and incorporate that into your child's diet as much as possible. So that could be, so we've got actually in 2 weeks' time, new recipe coming out. It's one with miso soup. It's like a miso soup, but it's got the bone broth in it. Delish. But you can add it to bolognese, you can add it to tomato sauces, you can make soups. And this in itself is incredibly healing on the gut. Eating lots of grass-fed butter, if they're able to have a little bit of dairy. So sometimes they can have ghee, which is the clarified butter, which seems to have none of the allergens. And then also the probiotics that I spoke about earlier, some in themselves. We get on my Instagram, I get stories, amazing change around stories so quickly once the probiotics have been put in. I've got lots of like skin pictures, which are much easier than explaining the gut changes, but as in things change really quite quickly when the microbiome is supported. So I would do that. And then again, to reduce the gas and the bloating, which often is associated with the IBS, by using things like fennel tea, ginger teas, lots of ginger in the food, peppermint tea, etc. So those things are all very calming.
That's a great list. We'll make sure we get that down, and also the links to which products they can buy from NatureDoc as far as probiotics are concerned. We'll make sure we get those from you too, Lucinda. What sort of effects can we expect in relation, you'll love this, to alcohol and teens if they were to be drinking? This question's brilliant. Are there any alcoholic drinks that are worse than others?
Okay. So first of all, my children's schools have been very proactive when it's come to teenage alcohol intake. And essentially, they recommend to all parents that their teens do not drink until they're 16 because it's going to do some degree of damage to their brains. Okay. Even though this is relatively new information, it's still important. So they will then suggest that maybe 1 or 2 drinks a week after the age of 16 is good to get into the sort of routine of it. However, the reality, having got 2 kids out of teenage now, they're a bit older, and 1 in teens, you've got the reality of teenagers, they're pushing the boundaries.
Yes.
One thing that you can do is to have alcohol-free beer in the fridge, because they often don't know the difference.
Love that.
And there is low alcohol wine as well, and ciders and things like that. So that is, I've been to a New Year where the kids thought they were all really drunk. And they literally, yeah. But what's really interesting in terms of neurodivergence is, I think, especially the ADHD side of things, there can be a craving, and sometimes the brain can feel much better initially when they've had a drink. So there's a kid I look after, he's not a kid anymore, I think he's 19, but he's had severe OCD and anxiety since he was 12 and has not been able to get to school. Okay. He's got a great psychiatrist now. He's under some really good care. We've been helping too. And it was only when he was 18 and he had first drink that for about 24 hours, all his anxiety and OCD went away, or almost. He was in a much better place. But the problem is that is not a good long-term solution.
No.
Anyway, we did some genetic testing and we discovered he's got a gene, which means that his brain responds really well to the GABA, which I was talking about, that's in the tea. But you get this GABA rush when you first have an alcoholic drink, which puts you in that calm state. Okay. Later on in the night, you get the toxicity, obviously, from the alcohol. But that first sort of couple of hours is why you feel good on it. And anyway, we've basically been mimicking that effect using antioxidants like rosemary, sage, thyme, etc. But also we found a non-alcoholic drink, and I think it's called something like Sentia, Sentia, I think it is. And these are basically give you a lovely feeling of alcohol, that GABA feeling, but without any alcohol in there.
Wow. That would be amazing to get young teens onto that, wouldn't it? Next question. Apart from magnesium and B6, what else can you give a child for misophonia? And for our listeners, that is a disorder that reacts emotionally or physiologically to sounds or noises of some order. It's a very specific question, Lucinda. Are you able to help with that at all?
Yes, I wrote a blog specifically on this, and I have expanded it more in Brain Brilliance, as I said, which is coming out at the end of August. In terms of actual research and what I write in blogs, what I write in books, all are evidence-based. So it's where there is research to back up what I've said. Okay. However, I think in this environment, we're talking about clinical experience as well as what is published in a paper where it's involved 1,000 children or whatever.
What you literally see coming in and coming out as a result of your protocols and approaches. Yes.
Exactly. So obviously magnesium and B6 both work neurologically to calm down an overactive neurological system and helps to rebalance hypersensitivities or hyperarousals. Okay. Another nutrient which we find really works, which works quite well as a trio, is zinc. And zinc is the second most abundant mineral in the central nervous system. I think zinc would be a really good addition to those two.
Thank you. Zinc.
There is also a mushroom called lion's mane that a lot of people take for cognitive support. And the research would say that it is very good for cognitive decline. So we're talking about later on in life where you may be thinking you're becoming more forgetful, etc. Maybe for the beginnings of dementia, etc. It could be very helpful. There's less research, or almost none, on ADHD and so forth. However, a lot of people with ADHD and a lot of people with these hearing irregularities like tinnitus or whatever will find that taking lion's mane will help over time to help rebalance that nervous system and that response. So that is the other thing to try, even though there's no specific direct effect that I could cite in terms of a reference study, but it's something that our clients have found have made a massive difference.
Great. So lion's mane and zinc. Thank you. Second to last question. I have just been diagnosed with ADHD as well as fibromyalgia. This is a late teenager. Is there something that I can do nutritionally to manage both? I am medicated for both, but I really feel I need something more natural.
This is a very common link. A lot of parents will have, say, the mum has fibromyalgia and the child has ADHD or autism. And it's very well documented in studies, okay? And we are now seeing more and more, especially girls for some reason, and it seems to affect women more than men, that you've got both. You've got this ADHD and fibromyalgia, or autism and fibromyalgia. And when that happens, you're thinking this is probably driven by this overall inflammation in the body. Up until a few years ago, it was thought that the brain is not affected by the body, that there's something called a blood-brain barrier that protects the brain from what is going on in the body. And it's like a Berlin Wall and the protection. But actually, over the last few years, scientists have discovered that, in fact, the blood-brain barrier can become very permeable. And there's also an immune system in the brain, and there are also inflammatory cells in the brain. And essentially, if the body is inflamed, fibromyalgia is a deep pain in the muscles. It's not like a joint pain. It's a sort of heavy, deep, chronic, dull. You feel very low energy, etc. But equally, you will probably have brain fog. You'll probably really struggle with focus, etc. And my thoughts with this is that we're looking at an inflammation picture. And therefore, you would want to probably adopt the principles of a Mediterranean diet, which are all anti-inflammatory. So lots of fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, olive oil, garlic, herbs, spices, etc. You'd want to probably bring in lots of turmeric, magnesium, omega-3. And then there's an amazing supplement called PEA. And PEA is one of the strongest anti-inflammatories that you can take and will help often with both things. There's been evidence that it will show with deep pain, but also it will help with this sort of ADHD brain. So those together, obviously one of my team can really navigate this properly for you. But in the meantime, start by eating a really good Mediterranean diet, cut out the ultra-processed foods, really cook from scratch, really brighten up that plate with the rainbow foods, get lots of omega-3 foods in like salmon and sardines and mackerel, and see how you feel. It could really help. Because you're so young, it's something that could ease itself up relatively quickly
and can be
I'm not promising miracles, but it's amazing. A young body and a young brain can adapt quite easily.
Absolutely. And I think you touched on a very important point there, Lucinda, and certainly for me, that we get out of touch with what feels good to our bodies. I think some of us live with gripey tummies and live with sort of latent headaches, and really to just get back in touch with what feels good as you're eating. Just listen to your body if you can. Quinn is becoming much more connected to his body now. So as he's eating, he can describe that he's feeling a good energy, or he's feeling apathetic, or he's feeling bloated, or he's feeling uncomfortable. And that mechanism, again, gut-brain connection, just the vagal nerve, making sure that we're actually communicating between what's going on for ourselves is a big part of the picture as well. Just reconnect with yourself.
Absolutely. Going back to the beginning of this podcast, we were just talking about, is this normal or not normal to have these symptoms? As you said, it's connecting with your body, whether it's you as a neurodivergent listening to this podcast or a parent of neurodivergent child, to help them, if possible, to connect with their body. And to say, you know what, every time I eat sweet potato, I feel lousy. It's not suiting you. It's not your friend right now. It doesn't mean it will be forever. It may be because you've not combining it with the right foods. It may be the actual food. Every time you eat tomato, you start sneezing, itchy eyes. Again, you may be having too many, maybe switch to red peppers instead. So there are it's basically being in tune and saying that even if you've got twins, you might have twins who can eat slightly different foods. They've got different microbiomes. They've got a slightly different kind of setup. And so it's just to be really tune in with yourselves or your child, rather than to rely on what is said on the internet. Because one thing is, a journalist is going to write a very general picture. It might be about one person or someone that's a blogger. So will write about themselves, their take on life. And very often people, especially if they've got a bit of that sort of autistic slant to their brain, which is very black and white, they can't see the broader picture.
The nuance.
And I think it's really important to realise that just because your spouse can drink 3 cups of coffee and still sleep really well at night, and you can't even have 2 sips without being wired all day, that's because you have got different genetic differences. You are wired differently. And it's just learning to accept what is right for you individually. And as I said, I don't think it's the food's fault. And I think over time, if you get the gut microbiome working well, the nutrition up to speed, the inflammation down, then very often you can start weaving in these foods again. I had to be gluten-free for nearly 25 years, and I can now eat gluten pretty regularly without any problems at all.
Wow. My partner in crime here at the Brain Health Movement, Connor, was the same with dairy. She had a sensitivity for quite a while and then was able to reintroduce it and then had to take it out. And so I think that it's an evolving picture. And the most important thing for us is to understand that we can go back and heal slowly, little steps. It's empowering and it's exciting and it's inspiring to hear how you are seeing this day in, day out, Lucinda, the power of eating well, the power of giving the body what it needs so that it can eventually accept a whole spectrum of foods. Why should we be limited? We all want to enjoy our food. We all want to be relaxed and celebratory about what we eat. So that's where we all want to get back to. Nobody enjoys restriction and diet. We all want to tuck in, don't we?
Absolutely.
So, Lucinda, thank you so much. This has been an absolute cornucopia of incredible information. We could talk to you for hours, and I hope that we'll be able to invite you back. And we are going to be waiting with bated breath for your Brain Brilliance, your book coming out this summer, and we'll certainly be sharing more information on it when it is ready to be purchased. In the meantime, where should parents seek professional guidance? And just a quick word on functional medicine. What does it mean, really? What does your organisation offer as a naturopath and as a functional?
As a naturopath, we're a team of naturopaths and nutritional therapists. We are very diet-led to begin with. We're trying to improve diet, improve nutrition. So we will do tests. We'll do lab tests if needed. We don't have to do them. It's really helpful if you want to really home in on exactly what is going on inside the child, because often they can't articulate what is going on inside. So sometimes you can't guess and you want to have that information. So functional medicine is first of all looking at diet, lifestyle, sleep, stress control, all of the things that you would have heard about in terms of wellness, but with the added of being evidence-based in that you've done some lab test work, exactly what the primary things are to focus in on. And as I said, the guesswork's taken out. And yes, so we are a team of 25 nutritional therapists and naturopaths. We're based in the UK. We do have one in Ireland, just outside Dublin. We also have a nature doc who's just moved to Australia. So we are expanding around the world slowly. And we all specialise in women's health and children's health. We do see men as well, but we mainly do women's health and children's health. So the website is naturedoc.com. We have an online shop selling the vitamins, the probiotics, the fish oils, eczema creams, etc. And that is naturedoc.shop. And then my main social media handle is naturedoc.kids, which is mainly Instagram. But I am on all the other socials as well, including TikTok.
And I follow you like a strange, creepy person in a car park. I watch everything you do and read everything you do. So I can thoroughly recommend it to our listeners and to our followers at the Brain Health Movement. Just to round off, a huge thank you to you, Lucinda, and to everyone else. We will be creating a free guide following this enlightening conversation with all the top tips and some delicious, healthful, easy and reasonable recipes, which you can download from our website, www.thebrainhealthmovement.com, and it'll be in the show notes as well. That's all for today. Thank you so much for listening. Big kisses and love into your day. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.